degree in history and English at York State College, now Keene. Earned an MA degree and a doctorate at Seton Hall, graduating summa cum laude. He's one of those guys. He's not us.
I put it into my wife says, put that in.
He's been a school principal and superintendent, served as a municipal councilman, and was elected 5 times as a freeholder, now known as county commissioners. He's been a member of the National Society of Public Administration, spent 47 years in the field of education. I thought I worked for one company for a long time. 47 years is phenomenal. Now the important stuff. He is a member of the Sons of the American Revolution.
All right. That's all we had to hear.
And he has a forebearer who fought in the French and Indian Wars. Now that's...
He was an Indian.
It was an Indian.
No.
He and his wife have lived in New Jersey for their entire lives, according to this. And he is the founder of the Historic Signs Incorporated, 501c3 organization dedicated to historic preservation. And I have not seen the presentation, I have not heard about the presentation, but hearing and looking at the title of it, it looks like we're going to have some fun. Dr.
Thank you. Some of you have the questionnaire, and there's also a survey. Now, at the end, everybody who gives me a survey will get all of the answers. Thank you. I'm kind of trying to move quickly. If I talk too fast, you've got to say something. But I don't want to keep you till midnight. It should run till about 11:30. Slide. FDR. How many think his name was Roosevelt? Raise your hand. How many think his name was Roosevelt? It was both. The answer is this. Alice Roosevelt originally said it was Roosevelt, but her father said it's Roosevelt. And when FDR was elected the first time in 1932, he was asked by the press, how do you say your name, Roosevelt or Roosevelt? He said, like the flower, it's Roosevelt. You know, we fixed that a president can serve for 8 years. A president can serve for 10 years. Why? If the president leaves office for any reason and there's half or less of his term left, the vice president moves up. So if it's at half, the vice president gets 2 years. And then is allowed to run 2 more times. And he gets elected, that's 8, that's 10 years. If the vice president moves up and it's 1 day beyond half, the vice president finishes up almost 2 years, but can only run once more for 4 years. So it could be 6 years, like the most a president can be president for 10 years. Slide. Now, I get this straightened out too. Who was the real father of our country? Now, people say, George Washington! Well, depends. George Washington had no children, but John Tyler, over a period of 45 years and 2 wives, had 15 children. His last was when he was age 70. So he was the busiest president in the history of the United States of America.
Yes, he was.
That's true. Slide. Now, who are the youngest inaugurated? Teddy Roosevelt. Almost 43. He was 42. Who was the youngest elected, we know, is John F. Kennedy. But other young presidents in their 40s were Bill Clinton, 46 and a half, Ulysses Grant, almost 47, and Barack Obama, about 47 and a half. Presidents who were in their 40s. Slide. Now, who was the oldest one inaugurated? Well, our current president holds 1st and 4th place. When he was elected the first time, he was 70 years and about a half. Then Reagan was the next youngest, oldest president. He was almost 74 first elected. Biden was 78 and almost 2 months when he was elected. And President Trump was 78 and almost a half a year when he was first elected. So those are the oldest geezers, you know? And a lot of us are up in that area, so you know they have their work cut out for them. Next slide. Now, the oldest former presidents, of course, Jimmy Carter, up to 100 years and 2 months, almost, 3 months. George Bush, the first, 94 years and about a half a year. And Gerald Ford, again, 93 and about half a year. Slide. Now, the youngest at time of death, Kennedy was 46 years and 177 days old when he passed away. And the next youngest president to die was Garfield at age 49, almost 50. They're both assassinated, as you know. Slide. Now, these presidents all had different names. Now, John Adams, when he was young, they actually called him Jack. If you went to Massachusetts and asked for John Adams, they'd say, who? But if you said Jack Adams, they would know. Jimmy Carter, most of us know his name was James Earl. But how many of us know that Grover Cleveland's first name was really Stephen, not Grover? And Calvin Coolidge, his first name was not Calvin, it was John, but his father was John also. So he used the name, the second name. Now, Dwight David Eisenhower wasn't really Dwight David Eisenhower, he was David Dwight Eisenhower. And Ulysses Grant was not Ulysses Grant, he was really Hiram Ulysses Grant. And Woodrow Wilson was not Woodrow Wilson, he was Thomas Woodrow Wilson. Learn something new every day. Slide. Now, these three had completely different names at one point. Gerald Ford was adopted, but when he was born, he was Leslie Lynch King Jr., and then he took the name of his father later on. Clinton's name, was he actually born, was William Jefferson Blythe III, but his mother remarried, and he took the new name of Clinton. And Obama, his mother married a second time, and when she married a second time, she married Mr. Sotoro. And Obama, while he was in school, used this name, Barry Sotoro, and then later went back to the name that we are familiar with, Barack Hussein Obama. You learn something new every day, right? Slide. Now, is there anybody in this audience who's 5 feet 4 inches? Please stand up. Stand up, okay. That's how tall. You gonna stand up too?
Yeah, I'm trying
Okay. The smallest president was James Madison. Not only was he 5'4", but he was only about 100 pounds. He was very tiny. But we'll get to the bigger guys in a minute. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Slide. Now, the heaviest president was William Howard Taft. He was 5'11", and he weighed at times over 350 pounds. He was the heaviest president, and we'll talk a little bit more about his exploits. I know you've heard things about the bathtub and stuff. We'll get into the bathtub more than once. Not with him, though. Slide. The heaviest presidents are Taft, Donald Trump, second heaviest, and Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland had a nickname of Uncle Jumbo. That's not in their choice. Now, not might be political. Just how do you get Donald Trump's real weight and real height? That varies all over the place. But he is 5'11", not 6'2". And he does not weigh 235 pounds. He was weighed at one time up to 287. Now, how do we know this? Because in the Eugene Carroll case, after he was convicted, he was weighed and height taken for the police records. And that's it. So I also checked him to be able to check. When he's standing next to people who are 6'1" and 6'2", they're all taller than he is. So we will discuss that, but he wants to be taller, It's his business, right? Slide, please. Now, these are lightest presidents. James Madison we talked about, but Andy Jackson, now he was 6'1" and weighed 154 pounds. He had to be a stick. And then Calvin Coolidge was a little chubbier because he's an inch shorter and 2 pounds higher. So he was like 56 and 5'10". So out of the three, he would be the chubby one, I guess, but he's still pretty thin. Slide. Now, this is interesting. These are supposedly the recorded last words of the different presidents. And some of them make sense, and some are a little funny. Now, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both were authors of the Declaration of Independence. They were political rivals at one time, but as time went by, they appreciate each other as patriots. Now, Thomas Jefferson died the morning of July 4th, and his statement was, is it the 4th yet? Is it the 4th yet? Because it was the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Unbeknownst to John Adams, he thought that he was going to be outlived by Thomas Jefferson, and he said, Thomas Jefferson still survives, and he passed away. Now, James Madison, I think this is a little humorous. His last words, he was in bed dying, and he says, I always talk better lying down. Never should have said it. Now, Grant was suffering from lung cancer, oral cancer. His last words, understandably, was, water, water. He wanted water. Rather sad. Slide. Now, Benjamin Harrison, he was dying, and he was in much distress, and he asked, are the doctors here? Doctor, my lungs. Oh, dear. And he ebbed off. Now, McKinley, he knew he was dying, and he looked up and said, we're all going. Unfortunately. Now, Teddy Roosevelt, I thought this was a little bit humorous. His last one was, please put out the light. And I guess they did. Poor Teddy. And then Roosevelt, he had the cerebral hemorrhage, and before he died, he said, I have a terrific headache. And he was gone. Slide. Now, Nixon, his last name was help. It was over. Reagan, kind of courageous, I guess you might say. This is it. Boom. Gone. Now, the congressman here is Carter. You've probably heard about this. In 2024, the last time he was able to really speak, and they asked him how was he doing and how was he feeling, and he said, I'm trying to live long enough to vote for Kamala Harris. Well, he didn't live long enough, but that was his last vote cast. Slide. Now, these are things that these people are the only ones to do this. Now, Martin Van Buren was a bilingual president. He was very fluent in Dutch because he was raised in a part of upstate New York which was predominantly Dutch, where all the Dutch language was spoken. He did not learn to speak English until he was about 10 years old. Now, Lincoln was a flatboat pilot, and he had a patent so that flatboats could have like a balloon thing put underneath them so they'd get over shallow water. He has a patent on that. He's the only president that we know of with a patent. Cleveland, the only president married in the White House. Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, was the only president who was a bona fide mountain climber. Now, Woodrow Wilson, the only president to have a PhD. Jimmy Carter, early on, he was a magician, and he did a lot of card tricks, but he couldn't make himself magic enough to be reelected president. Now, Bush 43, the younger one, he's the only president to have twins, Barbara and Jenna. And then the father, Bush 41, when he wasn't president, he skydived numbers of times, but he wanted to skydive when he was 90 years old, and he did it. Skydive. He's the only president you know of who skydived. Or skydove. I'm an English teacher. Which is it? Did he skydive? Oh, I know he skydive. That part I know.
He went skydiving.
He went skydiving. That's good too. Thank you. This group of ladies are so busy filling out those charts and I fill those tables. Now, Obama is the only president to have ever reached the Arctic Circle. Slide, please. Now, Andy Jackson is the only president who was ever in prison. Now, he was in prison at 13 years old. The British captured him and put him in prison in 1781. He eventually was released. William Henry Harrison is the only president who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. He wasn't, of course, a president then, but as the years went on, he turned out to be the only president to sign the Declaration of Independence. Calvin Coolidge is the only president to have a birthday on the 4th of July. A Yankee Doodle guy. Yes, sir.
Didn't Thomas Jefferson sign the Declaration of Independence? He drafted it.
Oh, yeah, you're correct. I stand corrected. Oh, why did it have that? Thank you for correcting that. I'll have to fix that. Okay.
And so did John Adams.
Yeah. Was he on the Declaration?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, resource, shame on the resource. Okay, I'll fix that one. Thank you. Eisenhower is the only president who served in World War I and II. Kennedy still is the only Catholic president.
Barney was gone.
Oh, source. Thanks. I need corrections here tonight. Oh, boy. I'll put Kennedy and Biden were the only. We'll fix that one. Now, Clinton was the only Rhodes Scholar. And Obama, almost every time for dinner, whether the family dinner or not, he dressed in a tuxedo. And Trump is the only president never to have any pets. Slide. John Adams, as smart as he was, he had an enormous record of playing hooky. He was truant many, many times from school. Thomas Jefferson, some of you may know, was also into science. He also did paleontology research. He was rather convinced, as president, that woolly mammoths still existed and that they existed in the United States. He was trying to prove it, and so when he sent Lewis and Clark on an expedition to Louisiana Purchase, one of their assignments was to try to find evidence that mammoths still existed. The only thing they found maybe were some mammoth bones. All right. Monroe, he was known as this old cocked hat, and because he kept wearing clothing of his era up until the year he died. It was out of style already, and people used to chuckle and laugh at it. Jackson was probably the most violent president even when he was not president in the years leading up to it. Some of you are familiar, he was in a duel where he killed the other person. In 1835, when an assassination was made on him at the Capitol, the assassin's gun misfired repeatedly. And Jackson charged him and beat the devil out of him with his cane until the other people pulled him apart. James Knox Polk, only president buried 3 times. He was buried, the family wanted him someplace else. He was buried there, they want him buried someplace else. Got him buried 3 times. We want to do it a 4th time, and they could not get permission to exhume his body again. So he's kind of like a president all over the place. Franklin Pierce, one of his presidents, was actually arrested for speeding with he drove in the carriage, he ran over a woman, and he was arrested for that. Now, Teddy Roosevelt, we all call him Teddy Roosevelt. Now, these little things stand for an expletive. He did not like the name Teddy. In fact, he resented it when they named the bear Teddy Bear. He hated it. The only person who had allowed, in his presence, call him Teddy was his daughter, and it was a term of endearment. Anybody else who called him Teddy, you could really cross him. He did not like the name Teddy at all. Slide. Now, Jackson is the only president to appear on Confederate money. Why? I can't tell you, but he appeared on a $1,000 bill. Now, $1,000 back in the 1860s was an enormous amount of money. Ulysses Grant was also arrested for speeding down a street on a horseback in Washington, D.C. Now, I think he was fined, and that was the end of it. Woodrow Wilson, as smart as he was, he did not learn to write until he was almost 10 years old. Harding is the only president who had both parents who were doctors. Calvin Coolidge never owned a house until after he was president of the United States. Harry Truman, after he was president of the United States, the only president to do this, he drove all around the country, strange things, with his wife, Bess. They stopped and meet people. He drove the Secret Service crazy because he just liked to be with the people. He would drive his car all around. Now, I'm 82, I only remember Truman after he was president. I remember when Eisenhower was elected, but I don't really remember Truman as president. But some of you here who are a little bit older than me may remember when Truman was president. Now Eisenhower, oh, did he have a time with squirrels? They would dig for nuts and stuff in his putting greens on the White House property. He was beside himself. He told the staff there to kill him, eradicate him, get him out of here someplace. I don't want them digging up my putting greens anymore. So that was something a little strange about President Eisenhower. We all think he was a really nice, kind man, but when it came to squirrels, he must have really hated them. Must have thought they were the enemy from World War II. Right? Slide. Now, George Washington. This man defied death so many times, and his death was gruesome. Now, in the French and Indian War, horses were shot out from beneath him twice while he was on horseback. His horses were killed. He himself was hit 4 times in the clothing, not his body, but bullets went through his clothing, including through his hat that he was wearing. He also had 8 major diseases, including smallpox, dysentery, a bunch of them. And he was so afraid of his health that he said, "Don't put me in a grave until I'm dead for at least 3 days." He was afraid of being buried alive. Now, as you all probably heard, there was a lot of bloodletting drained. That was the way to cure people those days. They actually drained, they figured out, about 40% of the blood in his body. Now, what made his death especially gruesome, at the end, he had this horrible sore throat. And so what they try to do, try to cut it without anesthesia, cut the sores out of his throat. And they're also talk about they burned them too. So I don't know what that means, unless they mean they put a hot poker to try to seal where they were. He had a gruesome death. He died in 1799. Now, Chester Arthur is known as the gentleman. He was very interested in his clothing. They say he had at least 80 suits and at least that many pair of shoes. He liked to get dressed up very nicely for on any occasion he'd be dressed. So that was something unusual. Teddy Roosevelt, most people don't know this, but he was blind in one eye. To keep in shape, he used to box, have his sparring partners in the White House. And one of the times when he was slammed in the head because of an eye injury, and for the rest of his term, he was blind in one eye. Now, we know a lot about Lincoln. Lincoln the rail splitter, Lincoln the flatboat operator, Lincoln the lawyer. But Lincoln was actually a licensed bartender. He didn't really drink himself, but he was a licensed bartender. I'll drink to that, right? McKinley, this is really an odd thing. McKinley made a point of always wearing a red carnation for good luck. His luck ran out. When he was assassinated, the day he was assassinated, there was a girl in the audience who admired, in the crowd, who admired his flower. He gave her his good luck carnation. So later that day, bang! It's all over. Clinton came from a very poor family. And early on, they had to live in the basement of somebody else's house. Now, some of you might remember Bob Dole, who ran for president. He also was raised in the basement, came from a very poor family. Slide, please. Now, pets and critters. Now, if I'm not counting president's dogs, cats, and horses, they're all pets. But John Quincy Adams, he fiddled with silkworms, and he almost treated them like pets. He was interested in creating silk, but he treated the little insects as if they were his personal pets. Andy Jackson had a parrot, and Andy Jackson had a very foul mouth in public. He didn't hide anything. A lot of presidents curse all the time, but not in public. And when he died, and the parrot was at the funeral, the parrot kept roaring out one obscenity after the other, round the clock during the whole funeral. Martin Van Buren had a pair of baby tiger cubs. James Buchanan had a pet American eagle. Lincoln had the most pets that we can find, probably because he had kids living in the White House, his children. He had a pet goat, a pet turkey, a pet rabbit, a pet pony, and a pet pig, among other things. Now, Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, his pet, he adopted a pet. He didn't buy it. In the White House, there's this particular mouse that came around all the time. So he made a point of feeding this mouse all the time, and he had this little bonding with the mouse. Now, some people in Congress, when they wanted to impeach him, probably said he was a rat, but he had a mouse as a pet. Now, Benjamin Harrison had a pet goat and a pet possum. In fact, at one time, the goat escaped, and President Harrison ran all the way down Pennsylvania Avenue himself to bring the goat back. And he used to go lots of times for his children to pull up, the grandchildren, to pull a little cart around the grounds of the White House. As for the possum, I don't know too much of a possum. We'll just play possum on that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, McKinley was big on roosters, and he also had a pet parrot. Teddy Roosevelt had a pet pony, usually for his grandchildren, and he also had a lion cub and a bear cub as president, as pets. Woodrow Wilson had pet sheep. He had so many pet sheep that he had over 100 of them that used to be on the White House lawn. He was big into sheep. They didn't use any fertilizer on one that year. You know. Harding had it like an adopted red squirrel. It was around all the time, and he treated it like his pet. Hoover had an alligator. So keep him away from the bathtub. And Kennedy had a pet pony, Macaroni. Right, slide. Here's some photographs of the goat with Benjamin Harrison's grandchildren, and the goat's name's Old Whiskers. Here's some of Wilson's flock on the lawn of the White House. Here's Teddy Roosevelt's grandson, Quentin, on Algonquin. And here, some of you may remember, John F. Kennedy, John, Caroline, with their pet pony, Macaroni, at the White House. Slide. Now, Jackson has appeared on more paper currency of America than any president. At one time, he was on the $5 bill, the $10 bill, the $50 bill, the $1,000 bill, the $10,000 bill, and don't forget the Confederate $1,000 bill. Garfield, the last president born in the log cabin. Truman used to get up about 5 o'clock in the morning, have a stiff drink, usually bourbon, and then he'd go for his walk, and then come home and have his breakfast, back to the White House as president. Nixon played 5 instruments. Now, if any of you heard Nixon play, he was a little bit rough, but he could play piano, sax, violin, accordion, and the clarinet. He could play them. Kennedy probably had the greatest reading speed of any president. He's been estimated at 1,200 words a minute he could read. That's figure 200 words on a page, 300 words on a page. So in a minute he could read 5-6 pages. Now, how did Ronald Reagan get the nickname Dutch? His father felt, and when he was a little boy, that he looked like the boy on the Dutch paint can. So, who did he name him? Dutch, right. You had to brush up on that a little bit. Slide. Now, Andrew Johnson, the U.S. Senator, a Vice President, and the President of the United States, never attended school. Self-learning. Grant, with all the war stuff, he was a blood and gore, he was afraid of blood. Garfield was ambidextrous. But not only was he ambidextrous, he could write with both hands at the same time. He could also write Greek in one hand and Latin in the other hand at the same time. McKinley often went to events and had a napkin over or a cloth over his wife's face because she was subject to seizures. And rather than having people at the table see her go through a seizure, they sit down. Here, dear, cover her over. Now, Teddy Roosevelt's mother, Martha, and his wife, Alice, both died on Valentine's Day, 1784, the same day. This was your mother and your wife. Warren Hardy was a tremendous gambler and card player. His administration, probably read, had gambling things going on in the White House all the time. And during Depression, during Prohibition, the kegs of beer and hard liquor just rolled right into the White House, no stopping. But on one hand that he lost, he bet the White House china on it and lost the White House china. Carter Carter, 1969, was convinced he saw a UFO. In 1973, he finally documented what he found and his sighting and sent it to the United States government. And it's on file there. Next slide. Now, Abraham Lincoln, many uncanny things about Lincoln. Now, I can't go into all of them because we could spend a whole night just on Lincoln and uncanny things. But how many of you heard of the Donner Party? The one that got stranded in the Rocky Mountains, and a lot of the horses died, and adults and children died, and they turned into cannibalism. Well, he wanted to go on the Donner Party in earlier years. His wife talked him out of not going. Had he gone, there might never have been a President Lincoln. Slide. Now, some other things unusual. When he was assassinated on April 14th, that morning, he had signed the Secret Service bill. Now, the Secret Service today is in charge of, among other things, protecting the president. Now, in those days, it wasn't an assignment. It was mostly just for accountable type thing. But later on in the day, they had invited Grant and his wife to join them in the president's box at Ford's Theater. The last minute, they didn't show up because Mrs. Grant did not like Mrs. Lincoln. So, if the Grants had been in the booth, in the president's box, the night of the assassination, maybe Lincoln never would have been killed. So things happen. So the evening, Secret Service was supposed to protect the president, and there was no Secret Service, but that wasn't their duty. So it's kind of weird, the events that happened. Next slide. John Wilkes Booth's brother, Edwin, a year before Lincoln was shot, rescued Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln. He had fallen off the railroad platform in the path of a train, and it was Edwin Booth who rescued the president's son. What a coincidence. Booth saves one, Booth kills one Lincoln. Slide, please. Now, some people guess this, but I don't know if you can. If you think you know, when I finish, raise your hand. What person was present when Lincoln was shot? That same person was present when Garfield was shot, well known. And the same person was at the event when McKinley was shot. Who was the person?
Robert Lincoln.
Let's see. Slide. Robert Todd Lincoln was at all locations when it happened. Now, who said Robert Lincoln? Somewhere there? Yeah. And that is, our Vice President. Okay. Yes. Slide. Now, you all heard about George Washington's wooden teeth. These are presidential myths. He did not have wooden teeth. His teeth were either carved from ivory, or directly from animals, or shaped from animals, and gruesomely extracted from his slaves, or taken because they were sold by poor people. That's where he got his teeth. He did not have wooden teeth. Now, another myth is that Lincoln wrote the Gettysburg Address on the back of an envelope as he was going out to Gettysburg. It's not true. The documentation clearly shows he had written the Gettysburg Address in Washington at the White House. He may have made some notes on it traveling out to Gettysburg, but he did not write them on an envelope on a train. Now, Garfield and McKinley both were shot. They did not die from being shot. They died from lousy health care. In fact, there's a great movie out. I started to get it on one of the Netflix about Garfield. There's a lot of detail about it. But from Garfield being shot and the way they treated him, in those days, they didn't wash medical instruments. The doctors didn't wash their hands. They didn't really care what kind of rags they used. No idea about bacteria and germs. And eventually, months after being shot, he had sepsis throughout his body, pneumonia, couldn't breathe, and he had a mild myocardial infarction. That's what killed him off, medical care. The same thing with McKinley, who died much quickly, a matter of about a week or two. He had gangrene because he wasn't being treated properly. He had severe bacterial infections, and he was in sepsis shock. That's what killed them, medical care. If they had right medical care, they both probably would have survived the assassination attempts.
Interesting thing about, I believe it was McKinley.
Say that again?
They had access to, they could have had an x-ray machine to look for the bullet, and they didn't use it.
Yeah, yep. They never found the bullet. Yeah. They put that found it after he was dead.
Yeah, that they tried to find it, just poke around, that contributed to the infection. But if they used the x-ray machine, it was at wherever he was at when he got shot, there's a good chance they could have found the bullet quicker, and maybe he wouldn't have gotten the infections that he did.
Right. Very good point. Thank you. There's a rumor that Teddy Roosevelt rode a moose. He was on the Bull Moose Party. There's no truth that it. Roosevelt even denied it himself, and members of the family did. Now, Taft, there's always a story that he got stuck in a bathtub in the White House. Well, that has never really been proven, and it's probably one of those things that will never be proven. But we do know this. While he was president, he had a 7-foot bathtub put into a United States ship, military ship, so when he toured the area of the Panama Canal, he could luxuriate in the big tub. However, more interesting than that, after he was president, and he was staying at a hotel, he had a very large bathtub. He got into the bathtub, relaxing, had water running. The water would overflow because of his weight. It kept overflowing. And on the floor below, there were people enjoying themselves in the dining room. Well, their dinner was ruined. So that is documented. He was overflowing, president. Okay. Slide. Now, Confederates in the White House? Slide. John Tyler, after his president, he was elected to the Provincial Confederate Congress. He was elected. He never did go in and serve. Now, Millard Fillmore, his daughter Sarah, married Jefferson Davis, who later became the president of the Confederacy. Slide. Now, the highest IQs. Now, somebody always asks me, how did they do an IQ? There's no machines back then. No. But people today who are into the IQ field, by examining, mainly, very important part of it, examining the true writings of these people. And by the language and the style, it helps them develop what the person's reasonable IQ would be. Now, there's other factors that go in it, too. How they spoke. Some of them are not all oral. These were not recorded. But John Adams, in different writings, is considered to have the highest IQ. They're all very close. He's almost 169 IQ. Genius is like 140. Jefferson, 160. Madison, 160. And almost at 160. Kennedy at 159.8. And Clinton at 159. All very sharp people. There's one thing I saw about IQs, and they had John Adams very close to 200, and Jefferson in the 190s. So that's exceptional. One out of millions. Slide. Now, what do these 18, I was saying 17 individuals, but there are 18 presidencies here. What could they possibly have in common? Slide. No vice president for all or part of their terms. And as Shirley Temple said, oh my goodness. She looks good here, doesn't she? Keep smiling, Shirley. Slide. Now, what do these 12 have in common? Washington, Harrison, Pierce, Grant, Garfield, Arthur, Jackson, Taylor, Andrew Johnson, Hayes, Benjamin Harrison, Eisenhower. Anyone want to take a guess?
Military.
What about military? You're good. Let's see the slide. Each was a general. Slide, please. Now, Washington, Madison, Buchanan, Jefferson, Polk, Benjamin Harrison, Taft all had something in common too. What could it possibly be? This is a big number. It's a big thing. It's really big. Let's see what the slide says. Lots of siblings. Benjamin Harrison was one of 13. Madison was one of 12. Buchanan one of 11. And Washington, Jefferson, Polk, and Taft were one of 10 children. Poor mom doing that laundry, I tell you. Slide. Now, Jackson, Polk, Taylor, Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan, Lincoln, and Garfield all had something in common. I wonder what that could be. Slide, please. Each was born in a log cabin. This is a picture from a postcard of supposedly Lincoln's actual log cabin birth. Slide, please. Now, William Henry Harrison was the last president elected who was born when we were the colonies. He was born in 1773, and we were not a nation until 1776. And Van Buren, who was the president before him, was the first president born in the United States of America. He was born in 1782, 6 years after we gained our independence. So you get the last colonist and the first American. Slide. Now, presidents with immigrant parents or wives. They did because there's so much talk about immigration nowadays. So let's just see what our roots tell us. Jefferson's mother was born in England. John Quincy Adams' wife was born in England. Andrew Jackson's parents, father and mother, were both born in Ireland. James Buchanan's father was born in Ireland. Chester Arthur's father was born in Ireland, a lot Irish. Woodrow Wilson's mother was born in England. Herbert Hoover's mother was born in Canada. And Donald Trump's mom was from Scotland. His first wife from the Czech Republic. And his current wife was born in Slovenia. So there's a lot of immigration involved with all of those 8 presidents. Slide, please. Now, presidential first. Thomas Jefferson was the first president to entertain a diplomat, foreign diplomat. Andrew Jackson was the first president to ride on a train. Franklin Pierce was the first president to have a flush toilet in the White House. It all comes out in the end. Lincoln was the first president to use the telegraph. Rutherford Hayes was the first president to use the telephone. Benjamin Harrison was the first president to attend a Major League ball game. Grover Cleveland was the first president to use the electric light. However, the electric light was in the White House when Harrison was there, but he's afraid of using it. Don't we skip to McKinley? McKinley was the first president to be driven in a car. Now, he didn't drive it. He was driven in a car. Slide, please. Now, Teddy Roosevelt was the first president to have a full functioning all-plumbing bathroom to use it. And in 1906, he was the first president to leave the continental United States. He visited Panama to see how the canal was being run. And it's hard to see the best Teddy Roosevelt on one of the big pieces of equipment. Now, William Howard Taft was the first president to drive a car. He was very into modern things, and he was more environmental sensitive than his predecessor, Theodore Roosevelt, who gets a lot of credit as being a magnificent president for the environment. Taft did not like gasoline cars. He had a steam-driven car, and he also had a car run by electric battery. He thought that was the way to go. That was 1909. Taft is the first president to throw out the first pitch of a baseball game. He loved baseball. Now, getting back to cars, Harding was the first president driven to inauguration in a car. Before that, it was always a horse-drawn vehicle. Harding was also the first president to use a radio broadcast. And he was the first president to visit Alaska. But he did not go to the Arctic Circle, as we said Obama did. Franklin Roosevelt was the first president to show up at a convention after it had nominated him. Most of them got a letter, they sent it back, thank you, blah, blah, blah. But he was the first one to show up. And that was because he goes to such a critical time in our history, the Depression and the financial panic, that he felt he had to be there. Slide. Now, Roosevelt was also the first one to have a TV broadcast. He was also the first president to fly in a plane. Now, Teddy Roosevelt did fly in a plane around 1914 or so, but he wasn't president at the time. He was a former president. So the first sitting president to fly in a plane was Roosevelt, and here he is with Eisenhower. Truman was the first president to go aboard a submarine. And Eisenhower was the first president to use a helicopter. Jimmy Carter was the first president born in a hospital. Most of the others are born at home or someplace else. Right? Clinton was, getting to technology now, was the first president to send an email, and Obama was the first president to use a smartphone. Slide.
Well,
Was there a question?
yeah, the fireside chat, what was that?
That was President Roosevelt, fireside chats on the radio.
Right.
Yeah. My parents always told her that.
Right.
Now, the first person to die in the White House of any repute was the wife of John Tyler. And 2 years later, he remarried. He was the first president to remarry while he was president. He married 2 years later in New York City, his second wife. George Washington, first president to appear on a stamp. 1847, a 10-cent stamp. 10 cents was a good amount of money back in 1847. Rutherford Hayes was the first president to use a typewriter. And here's Teddy Roosevelt, was 1910. He was the first president to fly in a plane, but he was not a sitting president at the time. This, I think, is kind of funny. William McKinley bought a bicycle. He never rode it. Why did he buy a bicycle? When he was campaigning for his office, he noticed there's a group of bicyclists who were very enthusiastic, and he had to speak to them. So he said, how can I appeal to the bicycle? I tell them I own a bicycle. So he bought a bicycle, but never rode it. But let them all know that he had a bicycle. He probably got their votes, I'm guessing. Now, Lincoln is the first president to appear on a coin. There's 1909 penny. Before that, it was an Indian head penny. Wilson is the first president to cross the Atlantic Ocean. Slide, please. John Tyler is the first president to take an oath from not having been sworn in as president, because he was vice president when Henry Harrison died. So he's the first president to succeed that way. John Quincy Adams was the first president ever photographed. Now, he wasn't president, this was years after he was president, but of the presidents that from him onwards, he was the first one photographed. James Knox Polk was the first president to have an invasion in another country. During the American and Mexican War, he sent the troops into Mexico. Grant was the first president to sail around the world, circumnavigate the globe. Benjamin Harrison was the first president to have his voice recorded. In fact, if you go on the internet and search for early presidents' recordings, you'll hear them. They're very scratchy, but you can hear them. Woodrow Wilson was the first president to meet the Pope. John F. Kennedy was the first president not to fly an Air Force One, but the first president to fly an Air Force One when it was a jet. And Bush, think of every Thanksgiving, he was the first president to pardon the turkey. Slide, please. Now,
Except, I thought
where were we? Oh.
Theodore Roosevelt had pardoned the turkey.
Well, what I read and researched, it says he was. So if you want to check that out, let me know. I'll change my slide. I appreciate that. Any corrections, Walter. But he was credited as being the first president to pardon the turkey. But let me know. I appreciate that. On my emails on the little thing we have. Now, these are the slogans. Thomas Jefferson, we match him, was millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. Anybody know what that was about? Barbary Coast, right. They were interrupting American ships, and if they didn't pay a bribe, down they went or they took their cargo. And that's where we get the Barbary Coast, was where the shores of Tripoli, from the walls of Montezuma, from the Mexican War, to the shores of Tripoli, the Tripolitan War. Okay? Now, the era of good feelings president. Now, some of these are campaign slogans, and some of these are just slogans that go with the president. Monroe was the era of good feelings president. He was only lost one electoral vote when he cast. All the votes were cast for him, but one person did not vote for him because he said Washington should be the only president unanimously elected. Tippy Canoe and Tyler too. There's Harrison, Tippy Canoe, and then Tyler took over when he died. 54, 40, and fight is James K. Polk. Anybody know what that was about? 54, 40, fight? Mr. Benedict Arnold, go ahead.
Oregon,
Oregon Territory, Oregon, Montana area to straighten out the border between Canada and the United States. He said, we're going to get that line or we're going to fight for it. We got the line. That is a cute one. Campaign slogan for Pierce. We poked you in 44, we shall pierce you in 52. Minds are always going, you know. Slide. Now, Lincoln, don't switch horses in midstream because of the Civil War. They don't change things. Grant was this is really a hard one. Grant us another term. Now, this is interesting. 4 more years. The first one to use that slogan was William McKinley, and we hear it so often now, but it's a very old slogan. Then Cleveland is Ma, Ma, where's my pa? Gone to Washington, ha, ha, ha. And that deals with the fact that he fathered a child out of wedlock, and that was haunting him while he ran for president. They used against him. And then Roosevelt was looking for a square deal for all. Slide. Now, Wilson, he kept us out of war when he's running for the second term. He got elected, and into war we went. Harding, after all the years of war, he campaigned on, let's make things normal again. Let's return to normalcy. Now here's a hard one. Keep cool with Coolidge. I guess you could figure that one out very easily. And Hoover, who felt we were having great prosperity and would continue, he promised a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. And shortly thereafter, the stock market crashed. And FDR's slogan was, a new deal for the American people. Slogans? Next. Okay. Give him hell, Harry. That was a good slogan. Of course, you know that had to be Harry Truman. I like Ike. Eisenhower's nickname. A new frontier. Remember? How many of you are old enough to remember Kennedy as president? Only a few of you? Wow, I thought you were old enough. Okay. In your heart, you know he's right. Barry Goldwater. And at the time, people against Goldwater added another part of it. Anybody know what the writer was? How it was turned around and like against him? It was, in your heart, you know he's right, far right. To turn it against him. And here's another easy one. All the way with LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Slide. Not just peanuts, it's Carter. And you probably a lot of you remember this one. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? That was when inflation was up and interest rates were like 20 and 22% to borrow money for a mortgage. Some of you remember this one. Read my lips. No new taxes. And he raised taxes, and that really haunted him, that slogan. And the one that came up, James Carville, pushed this on Clinton. It's the economy, stupid. And the last few elections, it's still been a lot depending on the economy. And then Bush, younger Bush, he was campaigning as a person who believed in compassionate conservatism. Some of you may remember that one. Next one, I think the last one here. Okay. Obama, yes we can. Trump, make America great again. Biden, jobs, jobs, jobs. And Kamala Harris, when we fight, we win. You probably remember, how many remember just about all of these? Yeah. Some of you don't remember them. Oh my goodness, okay. I'm too old to remember this stuff. Slide. Okay, presidential taste buds. George Washington, in spite of his bad teeth, would eat walnuts all day and crack them open with his teeth. Did not help his situation. John Adams, for breakfast, often had a beer and apple cider. Mike on the man? Well, I don't drink, so I can't say that. Jackson at one time got a cheese present from New Hampshire, a 1,400-pound cheese they sent to the White House to congratulate him. Well, it was there for a few months, and it started to smell up the White House. But it was so popular, because people in those days, you could really get in and out of the White House pretty easily. You know. And he continued to have this giant cheese there for several years in his administration. But they said it did smell up the White House. Now, sometimes Thomas Jefferson is credited with inventing ice cream. He didn't invent ice cream, but what he did do, when he was in France, they had ice cream there, and he saw how they made it, what materials they used, what the recipes were, and he brought that all back to the United States. So he is credited with introducing ice cream to the United States. And he served it as often as he could. Grant, I don't know. They say he was a heavy drinker. Maybe that's the only reason he could do this. He would have pickles and vinegar for breakfast. So good. Now Garfield, look at this frightened squirrel. One of Garfield's favorite dishes was squirrel soup. So that's unusual. And Grover Cleveland was known to be quite a beer drinker. And it would not be difficult for him and a friend to drink beer all day. And finally, what Cleveland did to minimize much of his drinking, he would say, I was drinking 4 glasses. Well, the glasses kept getting bigger and bigger, and by the end of the day, he was drinking sometimes as much as a gallon of beer a day. He would use steins and tankards to drink. Now, Taft, our biggest president, sometimes had steak for breakfast, steak for lunch, and steak for dinner. Doesn't help you lose those 350 pounds. Slide. Taft liked possum so much that sometimes for Thanksgiving dinner, he served this at the White House, possum, roasted possum, instead of turkey. Mr. President, I don't think I'll attend Thanksgiving dinner this year. Wilson, often for breakfast, ate 2 raw eggs and orange juice. Franklin Roosevelt, when the King and Queen of England visited the United States, said, I think I'll serve you something very American. So he brought out the hot dogs. Now, the King ate the hot dog, but his wife had nothing to do with eating a hot dog. Bush liked pizza in a very unusual way. It had to have ketchup on it. It had to have bacon on it. And it had to have a cheeseburger on top of the pizza. How much he could load that, I don't know how high the pizza was by the time we got time to eat it. Obama frequently ate a bunch of almonds before he go to bed every night. And Donald Trump, one of his favorite snacks is Doritos corn chips. Slide. Now, these presidents I'm giving you are ranked, and I'm only ranking them from Washington to Obama. These have been ranked by many independent and historical groups, and consistently, I left off Biden and Trump. I do know what their numbers were, but I don't want to share that. I don't have a fight here.
We are about to run out of our time limit on the room.
Okay, we're almost done. Okay, Lincoln was ranked 1 and 2. Roosevelt could be 1, 2, and 3. Washington 1, 2, and 3. Roosevelt was always rated 4. Jefferson rated 5. Slide. The lowest were Tyler, Fillmore, Pierce, Johnson, and Buchanan. 43 only are ranked out of 43 individuals. Slide. Adams, Jefferson, and Monroe had something in common. What is it? Slide. They all died on July 4th, different years. Slide. What do these 4 guys have in common? Slide. They were all cheerleaders. Roosevelt in college, Reagan in college, and Eisenhower and Bush in high school. Slide. What do these 8 have in common? Well, let's see. Slide. They were the last of themselves, had no direct descendants. The family tree came to an end. Slide. What do these 5 have in common? Let's take a look. None of them was sworn in Washington, D.C. There's no Washington, D.C., when no White House or Capitol building when Washington was sworn in. He was sworn in New York. He was sworn in Philadelphia. It was now Independence Hall. The same problem for Adams. She was sworn in the Independence Hall. Slide. Calvin Coolidge was sworn in at his house, in his father's house, in his house in Plymouth, Vermont. Arthur was sworn in at his residence, and LBJ was sworn in on Air Force One in Dallas. Slide. Let's see what these fellows all missed out on something. Slide. Make this fast. Washington was never in the White House. Adams only got into the White House the last 4 months. Madison and Monroe were out of the White House for 7 months because it was burned by the British to be restored. Teddy Roosevelt was out for about almost half a year because it was being renovated, and the East Wing was being constructed. Of course, now it's not there anymore. Coolidge was out for about 3.5 months because they had to renovate the 3rd floor. The roof is caving in. And Truman was out 3 years, 3.5 months, almost his whole term. They had totally gutted the White House of everything. It was just 4 shelves up. Next. Shortest terms. Harrison, 32 years, 32 days. Roosevelt, only 39 days of his 4th term, and Lincoln, only 43 days of his 2nd term. Slide. Now, the most living presidents ever is 6. And that was the first time that was 1861. The last time it happened was 2017. Trump, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush, and Carter. Last time at 6. Slide. 5 times there are no former presidents. Adams had none at one point. Grant had none at one point. Teddy Roosevelt had none at one point. Hoover had none at one point. And Nixon had none at one point. Slide. Taylor did not accept his nomination for president because it was postage due. He sent the envelope back. He finally was notified, hey, you know, you've been nominated for president. You better watch your heel. Lincoln was an excellent wrestler. Grant was an excellent equestrian. Wilson played golf in the winter with black golf balls. And Bush, 43, was known as throwing the best pitch in baseball for presidents. Slide. There are 3 presidents who had vice presidents who were Johnson. Van Buren had a Johnson, Lincoln had a Johnson, Kennedy had a Johnson. Slide. The first president with a beard was Lincoln. The last president with a beard was Benjamin Harrison. The first president with mutton chops was John Quincy Adams. The last president with mutton chops was Chester Arthur. First president with a mustache was Cleveland. The last president with a mustache was Taft. Slide. Now, if they ask you to run on the weak ticket, don't do it. It's almost a sure death now, or you're not going to make it. 1836, 4 weeks ran, they all lost. In 1840, Harrison was elected, but he died in office. In 1844, Henry Clay ran, he lost. In 1848, Zachary Taylor got elected, but he died. His vice president, Fillmore, wanted to be nominated, but the party bounced him around. And finally, Winfield Scott, he lost in 1852. So keep away as being a presidential candidate for the Whig Party. Now, who's on the money? Who's on the money? Well, let's see. Slide. Well, Washington's on the dollar bill. Jefferson's on the $2 bill. Lincoln's on the $5 bill. Hamilton, not a president, is on a 10. And Jackson is on the $20 bill. Next. Grant is on the $50 bill. Franklin's on the $100 bill. Slide. On the $500 bill, in December 1945, the government stopped printing the large bills. And in January of '69, they began retrieving them. Good using them more. McKinley was on the $500 bill. Cleveland was on the $1,000 bill. Next. Madison was on the $5,000 bill. Savage Chase, not a president, is on the $10,000 bill. And the big money, Wilson, on the 100,000 bill, which was known as the honey bun or brick. That bill today is, all these bills are from back then, the big ones, are about 20 times more the value than it was. So this would be $2 million today. Now our last slide. This is, I think, are the absolute weirdest things involving a president. John Adams, as long as Potomac wasn't frozen over, he would skinny dip every day in there. Okay? Van Buren, for part of his health regimen, he had a concoction of water, soot, and charcoal, which he would drink daily. Lincoln, his wife was into seances and everything else, and some of the things rubbed off on Lincoln. He thought he could see things happening in the future. In fact, he even predicted his own assassination. Teddy Roosevelt, this is really funny. They told you how he was angry at being called Teddy. Well, there was a picture of him that he could not stand, so he put it in a closet. One day he took the picture out and he set it on fire and burned it to destroy it. He just liked it so much. Now, Herbert Hoover, he insisted that no staff member in the White House could ever set eyes on him, and he never wanted to see staff in the White House. So when he was around, staff would run into the closets and hide, or outdoors they go into bushes. Now somehow the staff had to see him because they knew when he was gone, then he could come out. But that was a very strict thing. This is one of the weirdest things. Calvin Coolidge was president for almost 6 years, okay? Every breakfast, he had his scalp rubbed in Vaseline for 6 years as he was eating his breakfast. Johnson often held interviews with the press while he was sitting on the toilet getting down to business. And he said he liked doing that because the reporters were anxious to leave and didn't ask him too many questions. Nixon, for breakfast, would often have cottage cheese with ketchup. And Bush, I'm later all done eating, when he visited the Prime Minister of Japan in 1992, guess what happened? He vomited on him. So that's the end of my presentation. Slide, please. Thank you for coming and inviting me. Hope you have a safe trip home. And the very last slide.